There wants a war to reduce wages, was the cry of some northern gentry in the 1790s, and the reflexes of panic and class antagonism inflamed in the aristocracy by the French Revolution were such as to remove inhibitions and to aggravate the exploitive relationship between masters and servants. The wars saw not only the suppression of the urban reformers, but also the eclipse of the humane gentry of whom Wyville is representative. To the argument of greed, a new argument was added for general enclosure, that of social discipline. The commons, the poor man's heritage for ages past, on which Thomas Bewick could recall independent laborers still dwelling, who had built their cottages with their own hands, were now seen as a dangerous center of indiscipline. Arthur Young saw them as a breeding ground for barbarians, nursing up a mischievous race of people of the Lincolnshire fens. So while the country nurses up a race of people as wild as the fen, ideology was added to self interest. It became a matter of public spirited policy for the gentleman to remove cottagers from the commons, reduce his labourers to dependence, pare away at supplementary earnings, drive out the smallholder, at a time when Wordsworth was extolling the virtues of old Michael and his wife in their struggle to maintain their patrimonial fields. The very much more influential commercial and agricultural magazine regarded the yeoman in a different light. A wicked, cross grained, petty farmer is like the sow in his yard, almost an insulated individual who has no communication with and therefore no reverence for the opinion of the world. As of the rights of the cottager in enclosure, it may seem needless to notice his claims, but the interest of the other claimants is ultimately concerned in permitting the laboring man to acquire a certain portion of land, for by this indulgence the poor rates must be speedily diminished, since a quarter of an acre of garden ground will go a great way towards rendering the peasant independent of any assistance. However, in this beneficent intention, moderation must be observed, or we may chance to transform the laborer into a petty farmer, from the most beneficial to the most useless of all the applications of industry. When a laborer becomes possessed of more land than he and his family can cultivate in the evenings, the farmer can no longer depend on him for constant work, and the haymaking and harvest must suffer to a degree which would sometimes prove a national inconvenience. As for the village poor, they are designing rogues who, under various pretenses, attempt to cheat the parish, and their whole abilities are exerted in the execution of deceit, which may procure from the parish officers an allowance of money for idle and profligate purposes. There are, of course, exceptions, but this is the way the grain runs between 1790 and 1810. It was a matter of policy to increase the dependence of cheap reserves of labor, applications of industry, for the convenience of the farmer at haymaking and harvest, and for the road making, fencing, and draining incident on enclosure. What Cobbett called Scott's philosophy and Hammond's the spirit of the age was endorsed as heartily by landowners as by manufacturers. But whereas it fitted the conditions of the Industrial Revolution like a glove, in agriculture it contested at best with older paternalist traditions, the squire's duty to his laborers, and with the tradition of earnings based on need. The older customs of differentials according to age, marital status, children, etc., which were perpetuated under the Spinhamland system of poor relief, while at worst it was reinforced by the feudal arrogance of the aristocracy towards the inferior laboring race. The doctrine that labor discovers its own natural price, according to the laws of supply and demand, had long been ousting the notion of the just wage. During the wars, it was propagated by every means. The demand for labor must necessarily regulate wages, wrote a country magistrate in 1800. And he went on to argue that the poor rates, by maintaining a surplus population and encouraging marriages, thereby ensuring a supply of labor in excess of demand, brought down the total wages bill. Indeed, he thought himself a pioneer in the science of averages. Let us suppose the annual poor rates and the amount of wages throughout England added together in one total. I think this total would be less than the sole amount of the wages if the poor rates had not existed.